NHS leaders say we will never put an end to these winter crises unless we fix the crisis in social care. Now, I asked him this question last week and I was disappointed in his replies. I'm going to try again.
Keir Starmer got cornered and annihilated in the latest Prime Minister's questions by the entire Parliament.
In the general election campaign, Labour leadership promised that if we won, we would step in and save the Grangemouth refinery, retain those jobs and invest in its future.
The entire Parliament was in chaos as Starmer got humiliated for his countless broken promises.
It seems Davos man Starmer and Rachel from Accounts care more about their billionaire buddies on the world stage than they do about the everyday man and woman and child of this country. And I argue they just don't get Britain.
Starmer and his cronies are so out of touch with reality that they don't seem to care how much support they're losing.
Patients in Kent are experiencing a winter crisis resulting from years of underinvestment in our NHS. Many are having to be treated on trolleys in corridors with cases of winter flu and other viruses, providing a significant challenge to local health services. What assurance can the Prime Minister offer my residents in Dartford that the reforms and extra investment set out by the Secretary of State for Health will make this inadequate care a thing of the past?
The nation's healthcare system is crumbling and Parliament grilled Starmer for his complete incompetence.
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Member for Dartford just said, patients are suffering through the worst NHS winter crisis on record. Last month alone, 54,000 people waited more than 12 hours in A&E. Over 63,000 were stuck in ambulances for over an hour before they could even get into hospital. So there's no doubt the flu season has made the winter crisis worse, but we see these winter crises year after year.
Starmer's idiotic policies and a complete lack of priorities is ruining this country and leaving us miserable.
NHS leaders say we will never put an end to these winter crises unless we fix the crisis in social care. Now, I asked him this question last week and I was disappointed in his replies. I'm going to try again. Will he scrap the 3-year timetable he's given to the Casey Commission so he can fix social care this year and implement the reforms by the end of this year at the latest?
Everyone's disappointed by Starmer's terrible performance and all he's doing is making stupid excuses.
It is absolutely disgraceful that the NHS was left in the state that it was in. Absolutely disgraceful. We are investing to turn that around. We are reforming to turn that around. We are within that reform dealing with social care. I set out the timetable to him last week in the way that he knows it's set out.
Sir Ed Davis.
Speaker, I'm continually disappointed by the Prime Minister's position on social care, and I'm going to keep coming back to this issue because unless we fix it, we won't fix the NHS.
The only thing that's disgraceful is the way this tone-deaf Prime Minister deflects the real questions to run from accountability.
In the general election campaign, Labour leadership promised that if we won, we would step in and save the Grangemouth refinery, retain those jobs and invest in its future. 6 months later, this hasn't happened yet. If the refinery closes, then thousands of jobs will be lost and Scotland's national security will become massively weaker.
Labour made dozens of promises to the entire nation and now Starmer's being slammed for being dishonest.
Margaret from Stockton is furious. Stockton's Labour Council are axing her weekly bin collection, scrapping free high street parking and closing her local recycling centre, all while employing a ridiculous number of people on £100,000 salaries. But she's even more furious because they're taking on another one behind closed doors, probably in a darkened room. They've created a new interim role for the managing director's best mate on £900 a day. It's never been approved by the council. It's never been advertised as a job. Margaret's right to be angry, isn't she, Prime Minister?
The British people are fuming in anger over the endless blunders and betrayals that are coming from Starmer and his cronies.
Do you ever get the feeling this government cares more about their globalist friends abroad than you and me in Britain?
You have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Oh, silly me, we knew that already, of course. That was the Prime Minister last year in a now infamous admission that he'd rather be swanning around with technocrat billionaires at the World Economic Forum than being in his own country. And Rachel Reeves was doing precisely that at Davos this week.
Starmer's true colours are showing as his sinister globalist agenda got exposed, and now his cronies are panicking.
Everyone's skint, businesses are cutting thousands of jobs, and our quality of lives are getting worse. So what happens just days after the Chancellor's visit to her World Economic Forum chums? Well, right on cue, Reeves says she's up for joining an EU customs deal, the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, as a way of having closer economic ties with Brussels.
Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are trying to sell out the British public and chain us back to the EU in their latest scandal. What they're doing is nothing short of a complete disgrace, as it completely undermines what the British public wants, but Starmer is too tone-deaf to care. While we're stuck with this idiotic and delusional Prime Minister, America is making great progress under Trump already. Seriously, the comparison will blow your mind and prove that if Starmer really wanted to, he could solve a lot of our problems.
And in perhaps one of the biggest examples yet of this Labour government gaslighting the electorate, the Chancellor is now going around blaming Brexit for Britain's flatlining GDP. Absolutely nothing to do with her record tax rises, huge public sector pay cuts, or pay rises rather, or her own doom and gloom rhetoric. And let's ignore the facts that we had the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year before Labour took over. No. It's because the plebs, you, voted for independence away from the EU gravy train.
Is it not odd that Rachel Reeves proposes a deal that brings us even closer to the European Union just days after her trip to meet them? The British public is not stupid, and it has become increasingly clear that Starmer is hiding a sinister agenda, and behind closed doors, he's looking to sell us out and reunite with his globalist cronies. Perhaps the most disgusting aspect is how they're trying to manipulate the government into thinking that this is all actually a good thing for us.
And she added, "What I want to do is get some of that GDP back by having a better trading relationship with the European Union." So there you go, there you have it, black and white from her own mouth. The great Brexit betrayal becomes clearer every day. And while this government is selling us down the river with creepy globalists in Davos, back home in Britain, we're suffering the effects. A family-run bakery in Harrogate announced its closings for good after 119 years in business, after blaming the Chancellor for the final nail in their coffin.
Starmer and Rachel Reeves are so busy ruining our foreign policy that they don't even care about the mess they've made back home. Our economy is crumbling, and it's all thanks to Rachel Reeves and her disastrous nightmare budget. Small businesses are being clobbered, and they're closing down at alarming rates. Bigger businesses, on the other hand, are starting to realize that Britain is being run by a bunch of woke idiots, and they're moving elsewhere to escape. Of course, that means the working class will have to suffer the consequences.
While Rome burns back home, why is Reeves swanning around Davos anyway? We're told she's there to meet leaders in, quote, the global business community to encourage them to put their money back into the UK and back British business. But let's be clear, she's not even met British farmers that she and her colleagues have so badly thrown under the bus.
Make no mistake, this government couldn't care less about the British public. If they actually cared, they'd listen to the angry farmers that have been protesting for months now. Starmer and Rachel Reeves completely ruined the lives of countless farmers just to raise a measly sum of extra money through inheritance tax. None of them seem to realize just how badly this will affect our economy and food supply, and at this rate, things will only get worse.
It seems Davos man Starmer and Rachel from accounts care more about their billionaire buddies on the world stage than they do about the everyday man and woman and child of this country. And I argue they just don't get Britain. Look what the PM did in the immediate aftermath of Southport. He turned up for 19 seconds, laid some flowers down, and then raced back to Downing Street for a drinks party held for Lovey's celeb Labour donors. What a joke.
Starmer is simply so tone deaf and out of touch with reality that he doesn't understand the struggles of the British people. And how could he? He spends his time jetting around to different nations and is obsessed with the liberal socialist agenda. Meanwhile, the rest of us are struggling to get on with our lives as the standards have dropped incredibly low in Britain. Life's become miserable under them, with taxes rising, inflation going up, and our society deteriorating in real time.
Cover off the growth thing first, because we keep hearing about the growth agenda from Labor, and every initiative I'm hearing is a government infrastructure project. And I'm not necessarily against property deregulation. In fact, I'm all for that. You know, the third runway is a good initiative. But I think that the delusion that we have is that growth is driven by the government and not driven by the private sector. And my concern is that they just don't really comprehend that. Like, they've had 14 years to come up with a growth strategy.
Labour's entire pitch was about fixing the economy and bringing economic stability, but they've done the exact opposite. Of course, it doesn't exactly help that Rachel Reeves turned out to be a massive liar with her CV lying scandal. It makes perfect sense that Rachel Reeves has no idea what she's doing, and it is actively making the economy worse. The cost of living has gotten so ridiculously high, and now unemployment rates are expected to soar as well. All because Starmer is so obsessed with the trade unions that he doesn't understand that it is the private sector that drives growth.
Do you think Sir Keir Starmer gets Britain?
I don't think he does. I think that, as you say, he is quite happy to be abroad with technocrats because he's not surrounded by the people of Britain who do not like him. He has awful approval ratings here, so he likes to go and escape and hang out with his friends where he's wined and dined and put out in fancy hotels, and Rachel Reeves at it as well.
At the end of the day, Starmer is just a coward who runs away from accountability. He knows that his approval ratings are in the gutter and that the Brits utterly despite him. So, instead of trying to fix things, he runs away to other nations and lives a lavish life with his beloved globalists. We're seeing Rachel Reeves do the same, and it doesn't end there. The entirety of the Labour Party runs away from responsibility, and what they're doing is completely shameless. Do they think that they can escape forever? Because the public is furious, and it's only a matter of time that they start demanding change.
So, Bill, why at the same time is Rachel Reeves going around and blaming Brexit for sluggish GDP, when the fact is Labour inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7? Does the Chancellor not take a second to maybe reflect on their own first 6 months in charge and say, well, you know, markets, I guess, are driven by sentiment. We were so doom and gloom. That speech by Keir Starmer in the Rose Garden, his first ever speech, was one of the most depressing things I'd ever heard in my life. And they wonder why markets tanked and inflation soared and the pound dropped.
In Rachel Reeves and Starmer's delusional minds, they have done nothing wrong. In fact, neither of them regret their decisions and have gotten so used to living in fantasyland that they genuinely believe that they are right. The audacity of Rachel Reeves to blame Brexit of all things for her own failures is baffling. What sort of mental gymnastics is she doing? Either way, the public isn't buying this rubbish, and it's no wonder that Nigel Farage is gaining insane momentum. It's gotten to the point where he just might be the next Prime Minister.
Do you know what? All the momentum in British politics is with reform. Why? I think it's because we're optimistic. We believe that with the right leadership, this country can be turned around. I also think many of our potential voters are seeing what's happening in America, where woke is out of the window, DEI people are being suspended, and the economic optimism in America has much to do with the leadership. So, yeah, it's about being optimistic, it's about having real plans.
There's a very specific reason why Reform UK has completely taken over British politics at the moment. It's also the same reason why Trump is making huge waves in America, while Starmer and his gang are looking like depressed clowns who are way out of their depth. Farage brings optimism and positivity, promising people that things can change under the right leadership. At this point, the public loves that message, so it's no wonder that Reform is gaining such support. Even the people who don't bother voting are backing Reform now.
So lots of speculation about, where is Reform's support coming from? Is it coming from the Conservatives? Is it coming from Labour? Well, overall, there's more coming to us from Labour in the red wall than the Conservatives. But here's the really important point, Chris. The really important point. The reason we're in the lead is 20% of our vote is coming from people who did not vote for anybody in the last general election. And that tells you a lot. It tells you about the level of disenchantment there is with, frankly, the Uniparty.
It doesn't surprise anyone that Labour is losing support at record levels. It's obvious that with a buffoon like Starmer, Labour has lost all credibility and nobody believes a single word that comes out of their mouths anymore. What's interesting is that Reform has managed to turn non-voters to their side. You wouldn't believe just how fed up people are with our current political system, and that's exactly why they're going for positive change. Labour's done for, and even the Tories are starting to sweat a little.
And if you look at places like Wales, where you see we're now over 12 points ahead of the Conservatives, they fear that when voters see that actually Reform is the credible party of opposition against Labour, they fear their poll numbers could collapse. So when it comes to doing a deal with people that in 2019 I trusted and gave a pass to, and who let me down and the country down, no thank you very much indeed.
The Tories had a long-running government and they undeniably made some huge mistakes. That led to the Labour Party winning the elections, and now that Starmer has completely trashed their reputation and proven to the public that Labour can't be trusted, Reform is looking like the obvious choice. Farage has all the power and he's refusing to merge with the Tories. Whether or not that's a wise decision, time will tell.
Contrast could not be greater. We're about providing optimism, we're about providing solutions, and we're very much of the mind that the old two-party system that has governed us since 1918 is now no longer fit for purpose. Britain is broken. Britain needs reform.
The difference in the attitude of Reform and the rest of the parties is huge. People can sense the optimism and enthusiasm that Farage is bringing, and that makes him sound credible. At that point, it's really no surprise that a huge number of people are rushing to back Farage up. On top of that, he is great friends with Trump, and considering how America's making a huge comeback, Britain might too.
Right now, what I see is we're building, we're professionalizing, we're selecting our candidates with rigor, and I just think events are coming our way. You're quite right to maintain a lead for the next 4 years or whatever it is until the next general election won't be an easy thing to do.
It's not all sunshine and rainbows for Farage either. He has to maintain a lead in the polls until the next general election, and there's a chance that Reform's hype might die down. However, given how big of a mess Labour has created, that seems unlikely. Unless the Tories manage to regain the public's trust, there's no saying which way the elections will go except in Reform's favour.
When you look at the previous 6 polls from the same company, there is that momentum thing. The Conservative has slipped by 4 points, the Labour Party have slipped by 3 points, and Reform UK have gone up by 4 points if you aggregate the last 2 months' 6 polls. So there does seem to be that momentum going on. Zia Yousaf keeps saying he believes you are going to be the next Prime Minister.
Currently, based on the momentum that Farage has, it's undeniable that he is a very real candidate to be the next Prime Minister of this country. Reform has consistently topped the charts in public polls, ahead of both the Labour and Tory party for months now. Farage is ready for the job, but the question remains, do you think he's the right fit? Considering the state of Starmer, anyone would be better than him at this point. Starmer looks like a complete fool compared to someone like Farage or Trump.
When it comes to politics, in my view, Donald Trump is and always has been a peacemaker. God knows we need one here. He's even being nice about Sir Keir Starmer. Earlier today, he said that he thinks Sir Keir Starmer has done a very good job so far, and he said the pair will speak over the phone over the next 24 hours. Well, let's hope Keir's cabinet can keep their mouths shut.
Unlike the insecure and petty Starmer, Donald Trump is behaving like a real leader should. Despite repeated attacks from the Labour Party, which were frankly quite disgusting, Trump has extended an invitation to improve relations with Starmer. Keep in mind, a good trade deal with America could make or break our economy, so if Starmer has any sense, he'd accept it without hesitation. We can only hope that Starmer can get out of his echo chamber and stop being tone deaf for a minute.
Our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied. I was saved by God to make America great again.
Instead of this dreary message.
Things will get worse before they get better.
The first thing Donald Trump has done since he came into power a few days ago was put illegal migrant criminals on a plane back to where they came.
On one hand, Trump sounds like a visionary leader who is intent on inspiring hope, optimism, and making people believe in him. On the other hand, we're stuck with Starmer, who, on top of already sounding like a robot, only ever manages to say the most dreadful and miserable things. And that attitude makes all the difference. Within days, Trump had already gotten to fixing the illegal immigration problem. No nonsense, no gimmicks. He's simply deporting them while Starmer is busy beating around the bush.
Here, we have Sir Keir Starmer scrapping Rwanda, which appeared to have a deterrent effect, and banging on about smashing the gangs. So far, all talk and no action has more than ever entered this country illegally. Before his first term in office, I used to watch Donald Trump on the American version of The Apprentice. I loved him in it. So when he ran for president the first time, I was one of his biggest supporters. The backlash I got from this was off the scale.
We've been hearing about Starmer's plan to smash the gangs for months now, but there's been no real progress. If anything, the immigration numbers are soaring through the roof thanks to his idiotic decisions. Not only did Starmer scrap the only deterrent we had of deporting these people, he has wasted millions upon millions of our taxpayer money on his useless border security command that does not work. It's not just Starmer either. The whole Labour gang of cronies is rotten and incompetent to their core.
But here in the UK, we've got Rachel Reeves, who is now appearing to be trying to upturn a democratic vote by pushing us back into the EU, a failing, shrinking bloc, practically snubbing America in an ill-timed jaunt to China. Yvette Cooper attempting to crack down on our freedoms of expression and blaming everything on the internet. Angela Rayner with her ludicrous working hours and housing plans. Net zero mad Ed Miliband, education destroyer Bridget Phillipson and David Lammy.
Rachel Reeves is making blunders upon blunders by cozying up to China, ignoring America, and practically destroying our economy. The rest of them are either waging war against free speech because their feelings got hurt, or saying disgusting things that don't benefit a politician. Just take Angela Rayner, for example. When she's not taking freebies, she's busy running her mouth in the most appalling ways possible. It's a shame that we got stuck with such politicians.
In my view, a woeful bunch of misfits, and we have a leader, Keir Starmer, a man who admitted knowing about the background of the Southport attacker but kept it quiet, infantilising the British people, creating an information gap. Nigel Farage was right. You could argue that Keir Starmer's behaviour helped to fan the flames, and of course his famous 19 seconds where he spent throwing down a reef at Southport and refusing to engage in conversation, and only now he admits he knew more.
A shameless, incompetent, and woeful bunch of idiots are running this nation, and it's no wonder that everything's going downhill. The man at the very top, Keir Starmer, might just be the worst of them all. His latest most appalling blunder is trying to cover up the Southport incident, and he's being absolutely grilled over it. Not just in the Parliament, the entire nation is making a fool out of him. You can join in and show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.